this week we're going to have the wonderful opportunity to consider God's plan for us as wives and mothers. Now, last week we really focused on who we are as women. We've been thinking through this whole concept of biblical womanhood and really acknowledging the fact that God has a perfect plan for each one of us, and that our gender, being a woman, is a lot of His perfect plan, and how important it is for us as Christians to know Him and then to know His plan for our life, and to begin to then apply these lasting, timeless biblical principles in our lives, in our home, in the church, in the community, and beyond. So specifically this week we're going to be looking in the Old Testament at passages of Scripture that teach us about who women are as wives and as mothers. So you're in this class that's for ministry wives, so we begin with that assumption that we're all married. But I do know some of us are mothers and some of us are not. It is important, whether we relate personally to each of these teachings, for us to understand what the Bible does teach about our roles as wives, but also as mothers. So it's awesome to know that God has a perfect person for us in marriage, if He calls us to be married, and then He has a perfect purpose for us as wives. We're going to be looking this week specifically at the topic of marriage in the Old Testament. There's many ways we could approach this whole concept and look at these biblical principles, but we're going to do it specifically by looking at the life of one woman in the Old Testament, and that is Ruth. I know you know a lot about Ruth, but I do pray that this week, as you read the Scripture about Ruth, as we dialogue and interact about Ruth as a wife, that the Lord will teach you some important principles, biblical principles about being the wife that He has called you to be, and being the wife that you need to be for your own husband. So Ruth will be a wonderful study this week for us. Then we'll continue our study this week looking at motherhood in the Old Testament. So we're going to look at marriage in the Old Testament and then motherhood in the Old Testament. We're going to do that by especially examining the life of Hannah. What a devoted woman of God, and what a devoted mother. She'll be a great example for us as we consider these biblical principles about motherhood. And let me just say to you ladies, if you are married but have no children at this time or have never had children, let me encourage you to still read and pray and let the Lord teach you about motherhood, because one of the greatest blessings for all of us as women is to know we can be spiritual mothers to many. We'll be talking about that more later in this class. But as I think about this whole concept of nurturing and motherhood, I can't help but see it in my own life as it applies to me as a spiritual mother. My own personal testimony is that the Lord did not give my husband and me children of our own, but I am so grateful He has given us many children, many people younger than us, to love and to encourage and to mentor and to nurture. And so I feel like I'm a spiritual mother and grandmother to many, and I am so grateful for that and the many other blessings God has given me. So we're going to be looking this week at how the Old Testament considers the topic of marriage, motherhood, and then we can't leave the Old Testament without looking at the Proverbs 31 woman. Now, don't roll your eyes, ladies. Don't think that you can't be like this great woman in Proverbs 31. There's so much for us to learn from this scripture, and I pray as you read Proverbs 31, 10 through 31 again, and you let the Lord teach you more about who you are as a woman, that the Lord will help you to see that He can enable you through His power to be a godly woman, to be a godly wife, to be a godly mother, to be a godly influencer, nurturer in the lives of other people. Be assured that I'm praying for you this week, and I pray that the Lord will give you such joy in your marriage and family relationships. God bless.